We just can't.
So now you're in confrontation with the old people, pensionary.
I haven't been to speak for you for a couple of years even.
Yes, I was.
So it's a very nice, it's a big zechus to be back. Yeah, it's very nice. I think it's very special that you have this
We
so
were
frequent.
very much afraid that you would be a little bit hangover.
I'm not hungover. I didn't drink much, but I have to be known that I just had breakfast. Literally just had breakfast. I didn't drink much. I don't drink much alcohol. It's not my. No, I didn't. That's true. But what I did, what is the problem is that we, besides the late finished last night here about 12:30. By the time my wife finished clearing up later, and then I have family members who came from abroad, and they were staying in my house, which wasn't the problem. The problem was that one of them had his flight. One had his flight at 7 o'clock this morning, one at 5 o'clock.
Yeah. Okay.
So they didn't bother sleeping, but they were selfish and they wanted everyone else not to sleep as well, to stay up and chat to them. So it was a very, very, very late night, but it was worth it. And it's a pleasure to come and speak. Baruch Hashem, well, the good thing was I thought ahead, and last week already I realized that Sunday is going to be busy, Friday was busy, so I thought I'll prepare everything in advance. We've got everything. And I'm going to give you some sheets, and I've just asked Powell to go and photocopy it because I didn't know how many people. I just made 4 copies. I'm going to pass out 2 for the minute. And are we meant to start? Yeah, when he comes in, we'll start. Okay.
Afterwards, Rabbi Katz want to speak.
Have a cat upstairs.
He's now down.
Amazing.
Yeah, I've followed his story here.
Yeah, no, I really just, I appreciate that. I just had a tea.
Oh, that's also my coffee.
Before you go, I had a question
Or tea also.
Yeah.
for myself. There are a lot of people everywhere in Manchester, people where they have scooters. You know what a scooter is, where you step there.
Yes,
And they are allowed on Shabbos. I don't know exactly. So why are bicycles not allowed? What is the difference between a bicycle and a step?
That's a very good question.
Because I heard all kinds of questions about the bikes, but I never heard a question about
Jeff wants to say something.
Heeft iedereen? Nee, maar Ben heeft ook niet.
No, he means the non-electric, not the electric, not the Grommer one. He's talking about just the children's step. Yeah. He means the children's. If I understand, you mean the children's scooter. You know what? What children ride on. They're not electric. A step, yeah, a step.
So it's also it's kinderwagen for the children.
Children, yeah, that's
It used to be not allowed to them.
I know. I saw that in Amsterdam. I came across that. Actually, it was in
one of the rabbis. One of the rabbis began with it.
One of the in the pre-corona and then before I became Robin Garson, I used to daven not so infrequently in Bet Shalom on Friday night because it was close to. I live in Cantillon, and there they have the only place that I know of that have them in Hoge Amsterdam, but the Hebrew version, not the Dutch version. Because there is a Dutch version. The Dutch version is too difficult. The Dutch is too hard for me to understand, and the Hebrew version. And I saw there. Like you said, sorry, I don't know your name is.
Fred Hochheimer.
And so they said, Fred. They said there that, like you said, that buggies, push chairs, were used to be forbidden in Amsterdam. So that was it was very interesting to hear such thing and from a sexual Shabbos. But getting back to your question is that there's no black and white answer. He asked why. Bas asked why. Is it that it's not acceptable to ride a bicycle, a non-electric mechanical bicycle on Shabbos, but it is acceptable for children to ride these scooters. So of course, first of all, if it's just a case of little kids, it's one thing, but even kids, you wouldn't see a 6-year-old kid riding a bike on Shabbos. You do, yeah. Okay, it's definitely it's not, yeah. But it's more common to see them on a step on these non-electrical scooters. And the truth is, there's no black and white answer. In fact, it's not entirely clear why a bicycle itself is forbidden on Shabbos. There's a big discussion about it. One, in fact, the Ben Ish Chai, and there's even controversy about this particular Ben Ish Chai. The Ben Ish Chai in one place mentions that a bicycle is forbidden to use on Shabbos. In Baghdad, he wrote this, and the Ben Ish Chai in another place says a bicycle is permitted. And some people say that there's an error, like any controversy, especially when you have a contradiction within the book, there's some kind of controversy over it. But it wasn't accepted. It was accepted universally in almost all Jewish communities that at least as far as adults are concerned, we don't ride mechanical bikes on Shabbos. And there could have been a few reasons for that. One of them was the concern, which arguably is less concerning today, that you may come, that if in the old days, maybe it was more concerned, the chain comes off regularly. And then if the chain comes off, put it on. Now putting the chain back on would probably be an Issa D'Oraisa of Makaba Patish, of completing an item. In other words, a bicycle is practically unusable without the chain. The chain completes the bicycle totally, and therefore putting the chain on. You could argue that today that our bikes are their chains are designed, the metal is designed, it's tighter, it's a better fit. Although my bike chain was coming off for a while, and they said that in the summer the links expand and then it got loose. So it does happen every so often. But I even remember hearing from someone anecdotally that there's someone in our community, a Jewish person in the community, someone you all know, but the name is irrelevant, who told me that he's not originally from Amsterdam. And when he first came to Amsterdam, one of the things that he was here for a few weeks, he said he was so impressed. He used to live in America, in Los Angeles, this person. And he said he remembers coming to Amsterdam for forever. And there was something going on in the city center. And he rode together with a load of families together. One of them, I think, was Danny, who was his son-in-law. And they rode together to the city center, and then they rode back. And on the way back, someone's chain came off the bike. It wasn't on Shabbos. It was a weekday. Someone's chain came off the bike during a weekday, and he was so impressed how these respectable, professional. I think it might have been Danny even. This professional, respectable person in his work clothes turned the bike over and put the chain back on. And he said, in Los Angeles, that sort of thing just doesn't happen. If your bike chain comes off, you quickly snap your fingers, phone up some person and pay money to get them. But no one does anything in America. No one does it themselves. So we do put the chain back on. It could be there's another interesting opinion that it's Ovda de Choil. Now, Ovda de Choil is a very difficult category of Issa to actually put down into parameters. We find this, it comes like sporadically through Shulchan Aruch, this Ovda de Choil. It means it's a weekday activity, but everything in essence is a weekday activity. Walking is a weekday activity, getting dressed is a weekday activity. There's certain activities that were associated with weekday in the sense that they were things you would do to be able to make work easier, in other words, to make malachas easier. So as an example, that one of the most prominent examples is the Ramah in Shinchof Aleph, in the laws of Toichan, of grinding on Shabbos. There's a very fascinating Ramah. What he says is that the laws of grinding, like grinding wheat, for example, is a Teraisa. Equally, the Gemara says that if one were to grind pepper or little peppercorns, also is Teraisa. And including in that is if one were to take a knife and cut up a vegetable, certain vegetables, as a discussion, a sharp vegetable perhaps, into very, very small pieces, it's Toichan D'Oraisa, would be an Issa Toichan. Then the Shulchan Aruch establishes, based on the Gemara, that Toichan, the Malacha of Toichan, only applies with Gedulei Karaka, with things that grow from the ground. If it's not sourced from the ground, then Toichan doesn't apply. Meat you can cut into tiny pieces. Cheese you can cut into tiny pieces. Comes along the Ramah and he quotes a Rivosh. Rivosh is a Rishon, and the Rivosh says you still, nonetheless, even though it's true that you are allowed to cut cheese into small pieces, you cannot use a Riveisen, he says. A riv, that's the German word, I think German or whatever, some European word. A cheese grater.
Yeah.
Cheese grater. The one that has not the cheese knife. There's a discussion about the cheese, the grater. It's pumpia in Hebrew. Pumpia.
I know what you mean.
It has little holes. It's a piece of metal with little holes, and you rub the cheese over it, and it grates. On what basis can't you use a cheese grater? It says Ovdin de Choil. What?
Schaaf is dat.
I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it to everyone else. How do you say it?
Schaaf.
Schaaf.
No.
Schaaf.
It's a
Rasp.
Rasp. It's a rasp.
A grater in English.
Yeah,
So
rasp.
it says he can't use this grater, even though cheese is not something that falls into the category Toichan. But there's a totally different problem here. Ovdin de Choil. It's a work activity. What does that mean? So the commentaries try to understand. They explain that the concept of using a grater is designed to make things accessible in bulk. You know, it's like a Adam Smith kind of revolutionary idea, which obviously is a lot older than Adam Smith, which is that rather than take a knife and cut the cheese into very small pieces, design an implement that through the use of this implement will make it easier to do large amounts of a thing in a shorter amount of time. Now, there's no actual forbidden activity. It's not electrical, it's mechanical, it's working by hand. And as we said before, cheese in the first place, there's no forbidden law of toichan, of grating with cheese, because it doesn't grow from the ground. And nonetheless, he says, but the use of the grater is an associated item that goes together with the weekday activity, because in the weekday, that's when you do things in bulk. And on Shabbos, it's a drabonon, it's not a deraisa. Yeah.
It is for immediate use. If you use it immediately on your bread,
Yeah, so if
then it is allowed.
if so toichan, the certain malachas are permitted, not were, but are permitted for immediate use, like boira, if you separate off the good from the bad, and you do it with your hand, and you do it immediately to eat, then it's permitted. And toichan equally is one is allowed to cut very small or relatively small, the Shulchan Aruch says, if one eats straight away. But once we come on to the greater problem, it's nothing to do with toichan anymore. The use, it's like a kind of muksa, you could say. The use of the item is not because it's electrical. The use of the item is because this item is associated with the weekday. Again, I'm not talking about the knife that's made to slice the cheese. That knife, Moshe Feinstein wants to say, is just really, it's just a knife. It's just a knife that rather than cut with a knife, and some people are skilled, they can cut with a knife like this. It's just an easier way of using a knife, but it's not made to do in a bigger amount in a quicker amount of time. It's just a way of cutting the cheese in a thin slice. I don't know how you say in Dutch. You understand what the different implements are? Yeah.
The last one.
So I haven't got back to the bike, and we haven't started this yet.
Okay. Shabbos knife.
Yeah.
That's allowed. You have a week knife and a Shabbos knife.
Yeah.
The
Post we discuss it, but how a Shabbos knife isn't by the fact that it's not so much that it's not used. It's how what it's designed to do, which gives rise to the discussion. What about, for example, a peeler? A peeler used to peel an apple. So it's the same problem, because do we look at the peeler as an implement that might be over to the chol? It's like a weekday implement, but do we look at the peeler as just a more elaborate knife? And the Moshe Feinstein, who's maker, who's lenient, says it acts like a knife. And many people, my mother-in-law, who's in the kitchen, been cooking big pots of food for years on end, she had a big family, Kanina Horror. She peels potatoes with a knife. And she does it quicker with a normal knife than I can do with a peeler, with a slave. She takes the potato in her hand and she sort of just does this. Makes curls with a regular knife. So she demonstrates that the peeler is just an easier way of using a knife. That's what Moshe Feinstein wants to say. But a grater is not a knife. It's a series of multiple. You could call it. It's 100 knives in one. It acts as 100 knives together, and it's not even that you move the knife with a peeler or with a cheese slicer. You move the implement as you would move a knife. So it acts very similar to a knife. A grater, the item does it for you. You rub the cheese, and the effect that you've designed an implement that has lots and lots of holes causes that the cheese goes into very small pieces. So that's Ovda D'Chol. Why we mention Ovda D'Chol is because that's one example of Ovda D'Chol. And there's other examples, but some possible say that a bike and all these kind of things would be Ovda D'Chol because it's designed to be able to transport you in a quick amount of time.
But if you go for a mitzvah,
if it's the police, tell them I'm not.
No, that's not somebody.
Yeah.
So if you can place one mitzvah for another mitzvah,
in theory, first
then the steps should be allowed.
So the scooter is the step scooter, this non-electric that the children ride is more. There's more room for people to be lenient, especially with their kids, on the basis that it doesn't have the chain problem. In other words, you've already avoided one problem. You could say that these scooters, these mechanical scooters, they don't really get you very far.
But I saw adults going.
Okay, yeah, no, that's what I say. As I say, it's there's a large discussion of if it's forbidden, and if it is forbidden, why is it forbidden? No, it's not when you look at the item on itself, you can't find one on the Lamed test on the 39 malachas to immediately place. And in which case, sometimes you could say that the burden of proof rests on those who want to forbid it. And that's why I say that I don't condemn anyone who's adults who are going around on these steps, these non-electrical scooters. but the bites were universally not accepted. Perhaps, as I said, because of the chain, perhaps because of Ubd and Dechol, because of the idea that it's really used to go in quite significant distances in a short amount of time. So it's like a very weekday associated item. It's not, but like I said, it's not entirely. Some people say that the chain is the issue, and that's good enough.
I heard something else. I heard that the oil that's used in a bike can be warmed by it. The chain can be warmed. And then that's what I heard. And then you're not allowed to make
because you're softening
the
oil.
What shall I say? And
Cooking.
Thing that has to do with warm, with electricity, with fire. It goes like this.
I find that very untenable.
Yeah, but I heard it. I heard it, and that's why it was.
Point also is the first bikes with a lot of communities where people live far away from the system.
Yeah.
The rabbis are forced to
Literally, only, yeah.
because otherwise the people would come by car and they want to avoid that, and they allow him to do something.
That's absolutely true. That's always, and that's comes back to what you were saying before about mitzvahs and things. Normally, if something is unilaterally forbidden, we can't say for a mitzvah we do something forbidden because there's no concept of a mitzvah, bar ba'avera. But if there's something that there's a discussion about, and there are those who are lenient, then often a Rav will not even be forced, but a Rav will willingly choose to be lenient in the case that the people need it for the greater good. That's only true, and it's because we're being recorded here, but it's only true in the event that it's not forbidden. If it's unilaterally forbidden, there's no one who can say
I know the city. So somebody came with a step and a belt to a shoe.
Yeah.
Because you come with the scooter, you don't get an alley.
In Holland or somewhere, different place, somewhere, no names, right.
So it's the same here. If you wear on Shabbos sometimes, you're not allowed to have an
I can't talk about the policies.
No. So is it policy or is it something which you see?
It's not electric one. He's saying a non-electric. Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Okay, let's go to the subject.
Shabbos is very. Shabbos is very interesting. Very. I find that one of the beautiful things about Shabbos is that it's so. It's so. You can call it primary in Judaism, and it's so relevant contemporarily. Which is often you have things that are either very contemporary issues that don't have much. We can't find a huge amount of information about it in primary text like the Gemara, because let's say, for example, modern inventions, and other times you have things that are very old but don't really apply today. And Shabbos is something that both worlds blend, the contemporary world with the Gemara world. Yeah. Anyway, okay, we'll give it a start. We're gonna give this a start. No problem. We're gonna give it very fascinating. We're gonna give this a start. I don't know how far we're gonna get through this because there's a few different topics, but I want to bring up to your attention different things going on here, different discussions. Electric light sensors is just one example of things we're going to talk about. There's many examples, but what we're going to discuss here is and some of it might be already known, but it's a revision of ideas of different concepts in the way in which a malacha is performed on Shabbos, and bearing and with that in mind, the way in which the malacha is performed, we often see differences between whether you actively perform a malacha or passively perform a malacha. So we're going to start with a concept. We're not going to go through all the various things. It's just something grounded. You can take it home with you if you want. It's just to focus things if we want. But we have a discussion in many instances in the Gemara, what we call dover she'eina mischavan. Now, what this means is that the 39, let's talk about Shabbos. I'll give examples from things that aren't related to Shabbos because it's a universal concept. But we'll talk about Shabbos first. The Torah forbids 39 categories of malacha, the 39 malachas. And these 39 malachas, the Gemara says, have to be meleches machsheves, which means it has to be creative. Literally, meleches machsheves means malacha, work, activity. That's machsheves, that's thoughtful. In other words, it has to be conscious, creative, willing activity, purposeful activity. Based on that, why does it have to be that? Because the categories of malacha, the 39 malachas are forbidden because they were things that were done in order to build the Mishkan. So in order to build the Mishkan, it was constructive, it was willingful, it was mindful, it was with intent. And therefore, we learn from there that anything that doesn't come under those categories of conscious, willingful, positive work is not at least not a doiraisa. It's not the highest level of malacha. It wouldn't be a Torah. It wouldn't be forbidden by Torah law. It may be drabon. An example of that, which we're not going to talk about, is mekalkel. Mekalkel means doing something destructive. All the things that they did to build the Mishkan were constructive, not destructive. If you were to do something that's destructive, by very definition, you're not creating, you're destroying. And the 39 malachas are 39 acts of creation. There's some kind of creative activity. Writing is a creative activity. Planting a seed is a creative activity. If that's the case, they have to be creative. Destroying is not creative. If destroying is not creative, it can't be a doiraisa. You cannot be over. You can't have transgressed a doiraisa, Torah, forbidden law, if you do something destructive. There's one very fundamental problem with that, that several of the categories of the malachas, of these 39 malachas, are destructive by their very nature. Erasing, taking a rubber, un gomme in French, and I say it in Dutch, chum, and rubbing out is one of the 39 categories of malacha, but that's an act of destroying. It's not constructive, it's destructive. Equally, demolishing a building is one of the 39 malachas, but that's destructive, not constructive. Tearing is one of the 39 malachas, korea, but tearing is destructive, not constructive.
Destruction, you make also something.
But
yes,
yeah, you always have some kind of positive intention when you destroy.
Yeah.
But in and of itself, the destruction happens, and at a later stage, or whatever, or you're happy about destruction, but it's not a positive act, it's a destructive act. To get around that problem, the Mishnah made it very clear that even those acts of destruction are only forbidden by Torah law if they have a very constructive purpose. In other words, the Mishnah says, someone who erases with intention to write in the place of the erasure. It's not the act of erasing, it's erasing in order to make the text better. Or, for example, destroying, demolishing. A soisa, someone who demolishes, almanat livnois, with intention to build in its place. I'll give one more example. Extinguishing a fire is forbidden by Torah law. It's only forbidden to extinguish. We say in Amemat Vikin, hamachabes haner, to make a wick that would be a relight or a charcoal, like some kind of fuel source. Then you've done the forbidden Torah law of extinguishing a fire, or putting a fire. But were you to just extinguish the fire purely because you don't want the fire, you would only have done a drabonon, not a doiraisa, which is equally forbidden. Don't get me wrong. It's a drabonon, not a doiraisa.
And shechita? What about
What about
shechita?
Shechita,
yes,
is
constructive.
Shechita is also, it's a good question. Shechita in itself is something that's both. It's not just with an intention. It's both destructive and constructive because it readies the use of the meat, the carcass, the skin, and all the different things. So it's literally a destructive act that would be constructive. If you were to just kill an animal for no intent whatsoever,
then it's the intention for offering, of course.
Yeah, or for offerings,
yes.
or for, in the Mishkan, the animals were killed, were slaughtered for the skins that they would use to make the coverings of the Mishkan. So but if you were to
but even on Shabbos?
Sorry?
Even on Shabbos?
Yes.
No. The 39 malachas that are forbidden are the things that they did in the weekday to build the Mishkan, that the Torah said, don't now go and build the Mishkan on Shabbos. So from the fact that the Torah said, don't build the Mishkan on Shabbos, we learn that anything that is necessary to build the Mishkan is what's forbidden on Shabbos. Because it's not just like this like mysterious tradition that we have. It's very transparent in the text. The Torah says, don't build the Mishkan, and this is how you do it, and these are all the things you do to build it, and don't go and do it on Shabbos. From that we see that what can't you do on Shabbos? All the things that you need to build the Mishkan. It's not entirely clear in the text of the Torah which activities were done to build the Mishkan, but we can work it out, and every single one of them we can sort of link it back. Shechita, when did he do Shechita? The Gemara says, Shechita, when did he do Shechita in the Mishkan? To get the skins to make coverings for the tent, for the tabernacle. So, okay.
We're learning in Shabbos, in this shul, with this one secretary.
Yeah.
We're learning, and just see, there's one letter. We could make it right when we just scrape it a little bit away in order to have the learning on Shabbos, and as a minyan, otherwise we couldn't learn. So what is allowed? Are we allowed to just scrape it a little bit away in order to fulfill the mitzvah of learning, or are we not?
The Bialocha, there's a long Bialocha about this. He
I
doesn't
know,
talk.
it's just a question.
No, it's a long Bialocha. He doesn't talk specifically about this case. I'll tell you why. Because in your case of scraping, in order to make the text better, you're literally you're doing an act. No, but you're doing very constructive work.
Yeah,
because I said to you before that erasing is only forbidden by Torah law if you erase with intention to write in its place.
Exactly.
What about if you erase, but it fixes the number? In other words, this is the example that they bring is a good example. If I write a letter, I say, I owe you €1,000, and I accidentally add another nought, and it says €10,000. So when I rub out that last nought, I'm not just rubbing out, I'm making a tremendous constructive purpose to the number that I have there. It previously said 10,000, now says 1,000. It's gone from 10,000 to 1,000. That's very, very constructive, creative. That kind of erasure is already forbidden because it's real erasure. It's a constructive erasure that it fixes the text. It fixes amending a Sefer Torah is a doraisa on Shabbos, would be an issa doraisa because it fixes the text. If there's an extra letter, you fix the word, you fix the whole. In fact, you might have even fixed up, if it's a letter or a mistake that would render the whole Sefer Torah apostle, and you've even fixed an entire Sefer Torah. That's a significant act of fixing by just erasing one little thing. As a result, we could never do a doraisa for laning on Shabbos, which is it's certainly a mitzvah, but it's a mitzvah at Sibur, and it's not ma'akav, and it's not doraisa, it's rabbanon. We could never do an act of raising. What is discussed by the Bialocha is what happens if something falls, something falls that covers over the surface of like a piece of wax dripped. In the shores of the old days, it would very likely have happened. Exactly. So and a piece of wax had fallen on the cloth, on the parchment, and it covered over the text. Is it better? So there's no wax.
Okay.
But if wax fell on you have to remember that the Sefer Torah in the old days were used also for private learning. So that means that it could be that the guy was learning with it the previous night or 3 days before. Some wax had dropped onto it, and now he opens it on Shabbos to lane, and there's wax on the text. So now, in order so now there's a big discussion in the Achronim, the Mishnah Berurah brings, would it be better to remove the wax, which could be seen as some kind of erasure, or would it be better to just read through the wax if you can see the letters? In other words, normally we don't read through any partition, any covering. The Sefer Torah, the parts, at least the parts in the Sephardi communities in the Edut Mizrach, and in the Spanish as well, they would cover over all the rest of the text except for is that correct? In the Spanish, Portuguese, no? All the way around.
Well, until the 1970s. So the clock will not touch the Teva.
Right. In Rav Mordechai Eliyahu's kollel, I used to learn there was the community down in the Edut Mizrach, and they had literally a window. Yeah, they used they opened up the Sefer Torah to wherever it was open, and then they had like a cloth that covered a cloth that covered everything except for like a small opening, and they would move the cloth as they read, so everything else is covered except for that opening. So we don't normally but you can't cover over the text with anything see-through. We don't normally read through a see-through object. Even in the beginning, in the early days of glasses, of Brillen, the Achronim was speaking about whether you can read from the Sefer Torah through glasses, because they said it's some kind of chatzitza, of a partition. In the end, it was unilaterally, you basically agreed by everyone that you can. But in Corona time, there was a discussion, and they were making in Israel and in other places, making outdoor minyanim. It started raining. So they had a discussion, can we cover over Sefer Torah with a sheet of plastic that will protect the Sefer Torah? We'll read through the plastic. And so then again, that discussion came back to light of reading through a cover. Anyway, it's gone a bit off the point. So we're talking about some malachas have to be constructive. And another aspect of Melechas Machshavas, a dimension that a malacha needs to be creative, is that you have to intend to do the malacha, and not that the malacha results accidentally. Now, when I say result accidentally, we're not talking about doing a malacha accidentally. I'm going to refine my speech here. There's something called a accidental malacha. That means, for example, I don't know that today is Shabbos. I forget today is Shabbos, and I go out into the garden and I plant a seed. And then I remember that it's Shabbos. That's accidental. That's a shoygig. You've done the malacha. You absolutely intended to plant a seed. No one can say you planted the seed by mistake, but there was an external factor that you weren't aware of, that's Shabbos. Or a more common external factor of Shoigeg would be, are you with me? A more common example would be, I know it's Shabbos, I don't know that you're not allowed to plant a seed. So I go outside, I plant a seed willingly, with absolute concentration. I say, Hineni Muchan Mazuman. I go to the mikveh first, I dip myself, I plant the seed, but I just don't know it's forbidden to plant a seed on Shabbos. That's called shoigig, that's by mistake. What we're discussing is not shoigig. We're discussing where you don't know that the result will be a malacha. In other words, you do action A, and I'm going to give examples, action A. The result, action A itself is not forbidden. Action A is a permitted activity on Shabbos. The result of action A will be that perhaps a malacha will come about as a result, but not directly. So the example of that, the Gemara brings many examples, is dragging a bench, a wooden bench, a wooden chair on a soft, muddy floor outside. That's the famous example. We've got it here, it's Gemara Shabbos. You drag a bench, a stool or something on a soft ground. What happens when you drag the bench is it could perhaps dig a groove. Yes. Now, digging a groove is a forbidden activity of chayresh, of ploughing. It's one of the forbidden malachas. But you didn't plough. You took a bench, which is a permitted activity, and you dragged a bench, which is a permitted activity. So long as the ground is hard and not smooth, as long as there's a stone floor or carpet floor, we've done nothing wrong. So the act of dragging a bench is not a forbidden act. The problem is the result accidentally was something that would come about. That's called dover she'eina mischavan. In other words, you intend for action A. Action A is a permitted action. The result of action A is something forbidden might come about accidentally or whatever. That's called dover she'eina mischavan. It's called doing a malacha in a way that wasn't intended. So like we said, it's not shoigig. It's not accidental. Accidental, you intend for the malacha. You want to plant the seed. You just don't know that it's forbidden to plant a seed. This is you don't intend for the malacha at all. You intend to do something that's permitted, dragging a bench. And what happens is the malacha comes about or may come about. Another example the Shulchan Aruch gives, it's a famous example, is running through tall, wet grass on Shabbos. The act of running is a permitted act. You're not engaged in a forbidden act. But by running through tall, wet grass, you may inevitably uproot grass from the ground. Uprooting grass from the ground is forbidden on Shabbos. It's koitza, it's an act of harvesting. It's an act of cutting something from its source of growth, from its source of nourishment. So there again, done action A, which is running. Running is a permitted action, it's not forbidden. But the result of action A is that something might come out. And a third example, just to give you another example, is opening up a door, the front door, and there's a lot of wind blowing outside. It's harder to conceptualize this nowadays because nowadays our houses are much. But imagine you live in a little tin shack in Lithuania or whatever it is, and you open your door and it's very windy outside, and your Shabbos candles are right there on the thing next to the door. So there, the act is opening the door, a permitted act. Action A is permitted. The result of the permitted act is that the wind may come in and blow out the candle. So that's what we call dover she'eina mischavan. Now the good news is that dover she'eina mischavan is permitted. It's not forbidden. In other words, you are allowed to do on Shabbos, lechatchila to begin with, not d'oraisa and not drabonon, totally permitted to do action A if the result would be a malacha, as long as one thing, so long as it's not definite that the malacha will happen. So good? In other words, if it's not absolutely, I don't know this ground, if it's significantly soft enough to form a groove when I drag the bench, or I don't know the weight of the bench to know whether the bench will make a groove. So I drag the bench, not knowing, unsure, perhaps it will do it, perhaps it won't do it. It's not inevitable. It's very likely it might not happen, or plausible that it might not happen. Then it's permitted.
Like snow.
Do the action by Mazit.
But this is Mazit. This is Mazit.
No, but we have the Shabbos candle somewhere standing.
Yeah.
But if we open the door, always something happens. So if you would open both doors to the kitchen and to the hall, then you know it will be burned. It will burn quicker. So if you think it's
you're talking about the central heat, the save. So there we're ready to go into a third discussion, which is something that may result, but if it does result, there's going to be a significant time relapse. That's called grommer. That's where the discussion of grommer, which we're not going to talk about today, that's where the discussion of grommer comes in. Grommer is there's a relapse in time. In other words, it's true, it may happen, it may result, but there's a significant time lapse. When I say significant doesn't need to mean 5 minutes. It could potentially, in theory, plausibly be 3 seconds or 2 seconds, but it's not the same moment.
Opening the door, the thermostat will go on.
That is the basis on which they built the scrutiny.
Yes, this grommer, in other words, but grommer is itself an entire different issue. The grommer switch. The grommer is and grommer is also very difficult.
But maybe you come to the biggest question today is when we came 30, 40 years ago, we the pensionados, when we came from the Lekstraat, and some house had an electric photo cell.
Then
it was advised not to pass by.
We're going to get to light sensors, but I don't know how much we're going to do. We're going to get there.
Yes.
Dan moet ik nemen.
When I lived here, and I was in down, and we go to back from here from yesterday Friday evening. I know I have to walk on the other side because it was light. But I remember my neighbors had the same, and asked how I have to go inside my house. I can't. So he said, no, you have to like this, and then you. If it then is burning, okay, but don't go like this. So Shabbos make it.
So we'll try and get somewhere towards the light sensors by the end. What time do we have until?
You have time because you are the only today.
Okay.
Because dit is met Eli, maar Eli moest met zijn vrouw naar het ziekenhuis. Daarom.
So we'll try and get to light. Let's carry on. We have to build it in stages. So what we've established first is that, to summarize, that a malach has to be done consciously and willingly, etc. And therefore we said that if you do a malacha, that you're consciously trying to do action A, which is not forbidden, which is permitted, and the result of action A might happen action B, and it's permitted. That's called dover she'eino mischavan, and the Shulchan Aruch passes it's a machlokas in the Gemara. There's an opinion that says it is forbidden, but the Shulchan Aruch passes dover she'eino mischavan mutter, which means if it's not inevitable that will happen, action A is permitted, and possibly action B is possibly the result will be a malacha, permitted. However, says the Gemara in multiple places across Shas, Moider Reb Shimon Reb Shimon agrees that with the words are very interesting words, psik reisha, that's I've got written on top, psik reisha. Psik reisha means chopping off the head, cutting the head off. Reb Shimon agrees that if you chop off the head, the animal will die. What does that mean? It's an expression. The expression means that even the opinion of Shimon, who said that dover she'eino mischavan is permitted, in other words, that doing action A, which is a permitted action, that will perhaps result in action B, perhaps result in a malacha, is permitted, only said it if it's a perhaps. If it's a certainty, like the certainty of chopping off an animal's head, the certainty is that the animal will die. If it's that level of certainty, if it's an inevitable certainty, then you cannot do it. In other words, if you do action A, but inevitably action B will result, it's called psik reisha. Psik reisha is forbidden. It's even forbidden by Torah law. That means the Maggid Mishnah, one of the commentaries on the Shon, who's a Pirush, a commentary on the Rambam, says psik reisha is tantamount, it's identical to doing the malacha itself.
Only when it's at the same moment.
Yeah, but there's no time. Yeah, it's the same moment. So it's tantamount to doing the malacha itself. So let's go back to our examples that we gave before. If you drag a heavy bench on soft floor, soft mud, that you know that it will make a groove, that this will inevitably make a groove, then it is forbidden. It's not just forbidden, it would be, in theory, forbidden by Torah law. If you were to run on wet grass in the event that it's tall and it would inevitably remove grass, then it's forbidden to run in that grass by Torah law.
Also in wool carpet.
In wool carpet.
Also.
Thick wool carpet.
Snow.
Because you make grooves.
I wonder though if thick wool carpet is the same.
You can see the grooves.
Yeah.
No, but they are temporary.
What do you mean where it just pushes aside the carpet?
Ja, maar nu zie je.
Met hoge polen bedoel je.
Ja, hoge polen.
Als je doorheen loopt, dan gaat het ook.
Ja, precies. And just a question, don't think about it now. You can answer later.
All right, so walking in the snow is not making a groove in the ground. It's making a mark. Yeah, but the Shulchan Aruch does discuss about there's two possible problems walking in snow. One of them is crushing ice, which you're not allowed to crush ice, and the other one is, like say, making marks. Both of them are permitted because when the ground is snowy outside, this is the way in which human beings walk. It's not intentional, and even if it's inevitable, but both of those acts are not. They're not. Forbidden acts by Torah. And both those, it's not, and they're not of a permanent nature as well. For example, if someone writes, it's forbidden to write on Shabbos. If someone writes in a that wasn't meant to say. I'm just starting off with to summarize the Torah forbidden and then Drabonon. If someone were to write with a dover she'ena miskayim, that means something that doesn't last. In other words, he would take, the example of the Shulchan Aruch is when it's steamy on the windows and you take your finger and you write on the windows, you're only over a drabonon and not a doraisa. Because normally writing is doraisa, and here you're only over drabonon. In other words, in the snow, it's not miskayim, it's not designed to last. And if it doesn't last, it can't be a doraisa, which is exactly like we said before, that meleches machsheves excludes creative activity, excludes anything that's not totally creative. And if it's not designed to last, it won't last on its own, it's not entirely creative, it's only drabonon. There's multiple examples where that comes into halacha, devorim she'enu miskayim, that they don't last for a long time. There's a big discussion about the effect, the digital effect that we have, let's say a camera on us, exactly this on a screen, yeah, if this is called drawing or not. Yeah, now leaving aside electricity and all the other issues, but what about drawing? Right now, I am forming a colorful image on the screen, but in essence, it's not miskayim. So it's certain it doesn't last. It has zero. It's a constant regeneration with electricity on the LED dots, whatever it is, to make the image again and again. But each image only lasts for a moment, a split second, then it's gone. So it's a very not lasting image, which at least would be drabonon, not doraisa.
Would you be willing to say that sneakers should be forbidden on Shabbos?
Sneakers?
Sneakers, yes, those sport shoes with which you can create nice stripes on the floor, for instance.
That's what one of our friends here asked. And I said that even in the instance that you would be making marks in the floor, it wouldn't last. Therefore, it would only be a drabonon. And the Shulchan Aruch said that this kind of drabonon, where you couldn't avoid it, in other words, when the ground is snowy, you can't avoid it. They didn't just say it for the sake of going to shul. When they made the drabonon, they said that in the case of a drabonon, that's not going to last. That's not intentional. Yeah, it's not at all intentional because you're walking. It's like we said before, you're doing a permitted action that results in something forbidden. That's a drabonon, and that you need to do it because there's no other way to walk. They permitted you to do it. So they never said there's a problem walking in the snow on Shabbos, even if you have legs and things. What may be problematic, and I say it may be problematic, is that if the snow has started to disappear and there's lots of areas with no snow and you can easily avoid walking in the snow, it's very highly likely it's better not to walk in the snow because, like we said, all these things is we're just downgrading it. We're downgrading it from being a Torah forbidden law to a drabonon, and on the basis that it's drabonon, we're trying to say in which cases the drabonon say that the extenuating circumstances allow it to be done. But in the event that you can avoid it by walking around the patch of snow, then why do you need to walk in the patch of snow? In other words, there is a good argument to say that if there's only small patches of snow left on the ground and they don't cover the majority of the ground, then if you can easily avoid walking through the snow, you should. Some authorities, if I'm not mistaken, I don't remember offhand, I haven't prepared it, but some authorities I think say even then you can walk through snow because it was permitted entirely, but we'll leave that for now. So what we've established is that if it's inevitable, if you do action A, and inevitably from action A, a malacha results, then it's forbidden. It's forbidden by Torah law. It's a very interesting fact, this, because I just told you many times in the last 45 minutes that if you're not intending to do the malacha, but you intend to do a permitted act, then it can't be a Torah law, because the Torah only forbade 39 categories of intentional activity. So now I'm telling you, though, that if you drag a bench on the floor and you don't intend to make a groove, but it's inevitable it will make a groove, then I just told you it's still forbidden by Torah law. So there's a very fascinating piece of Rabbi Chanan Wasserman, who was one of the big pre-war yeshivas, who had a lot of you call it lomdas, like very deep, trying to understand the technicalities, the fine-tuning, the concepts of what's going on. And what Rabbi Chanan said was that on the basis that inevitably something will happen, it's as if you intended for it to happen. In other words, just knowing it will happen with certainty is, so why, even though you're actually involved in dragging the bench, but the knowledge, the certainty that it's going to happen makes it as if you intend to do two activities. You intend to drag a bench and you equally at the same time intend to dig a groove. So just because you're doing a permitted thing doesn't make the forbidden thing permitted. In other words, I'll give you an example of that is if I were to take a pot of water that's placed on the kitchen counter, on the kitchen side, not on the stove top, and I want to use the kitchen side for something else. So I pick up the pot and I put it down on the fire. Yeah, it's a forbidden act of cooking. Now, just because I'm doing something permitted at the same time, which is picking up a pot from the counter, doesn't make it okay to do something forbidden. It doesn't like, oh, that's right, the act is okay because one thing. So therefore, he says, if you know that dragging the bench, dragging the bench is inevitably going to cause a groove, then even though you want to drag the bench, but it's as if, or it's not just as if we reckon it, that the knowledge that you are now going to make a groove is that you intend to make the groove as well.
The certainty that in the act that you did first, the second one exists is not the same with the pot because you don't.
Absolutely, yeah. I agree. I absolutely agree. It's not. I want more trying to just bring out an exaggerated example that doing a permitted thing doesn't override. If you're doing two actions at once, I have to think of a better way. You literally do two actions. Yeah, if you do two actions in the same moment, the other one exists. Yeah, I mean, if for argument's sake, I'm not going to think of examples because we could end up again finding examples that aren't exact. But doing it makes logical sense. You can't say it's okay to dig a hole in the ground if at the same time you're doing something permitted. Mm-hmm. If you're digging, you're digging. The permitted thing is permitted, and the forbidden thing is forbidden. That's that. So that's where this concept of sikration comes in, where if it's inevitable, if it's absolutely inevitable that the result will be a forbidden act, then you can't even do the permitted act. So far we've established as a Torah way of doing something which is intentional. There's Dover Shadem Mischavan, where you do act A, and act A results maybe, perhaps, in a malacha, which we said is not forbidden at all, it's permitted. And then we said, but if it's inevitable that it will result in a malacha, it's forbidden by Torah law. Now we're going to go into category fourth level down. What if we talk about this inevitable case, like we said, but dragging the bench on the floor, on a soft ground, a heavy bench, it's inevitable that it will make a groove. Yeah, but okay, but what happens if you don't want the groove? In other words, if you want the groove, but you don't actually dig the groove, you drag a bench, and you're dragging a bench. At the same time, it's inevitable you'll make a groove. Because it's inevitable you make a groove, we reckon it as if you made the groove with your hands. You've done a forbidden act, d'oraisa. What happens if you don't want the groove? You actually don't want it. You're not happy. It ruined your field. It ruined your garden. It made a right old mess. And after Shabbos, you're going to come and cover it back in because you had no other way. You didn't have a friend around to help you lift the bench. So you dragged it yourself, but you did not want that groove. So that's what we call psik reisha deloi nichalei. Psik reisha, we said, means you cut off the head. It's this expression for inevitability. It's the Gemara's expression for inevitability. But loi nichalei, he doesn't want it. He does an inevitable act. Action A is permitted. He does action A. Inevitably, a malacha comes about, but you don't want that inevitable malacha, that inevitable act.
Almost a contradiction. Okay.
Yeah.
It sounds like a contradiction.
Why?
Because you know that it is inevitable.
You know it's going to happen. You don't want it to happen. You just can't. You can't avoid it because you have to drag the back.
Willing the master of the act.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely on Shabbos for sure, because we said Shabbos has to be creative. Has to be there. Has to be a will.
Agree, but
willpower.
But you know that it will happen.
Yeah. You know it will happen.
So it's I don't want that it will happen. So if somebody, because you is saying, okay, I'll help you, it won't happen.
No. You in theory, you're right that it's inevitable, and just because I don't want it to happen doesn't mean ever. But again, you have to remember, we have to still go back to the beginning. You're not actively doing a forbidden.
No, I agree.
You're doing action that's permitted, and it's only because this inevitable link that we made it forbidden. And now we're saying, but the inevitable link, we didn't want it, so maybe it's not anymore forbidden by Torah law or whatever. So there's a discussion. There's a very big, famous discussion in the Rishonim between the Ri Balatosfos, one of the main Tosfos, and the Aruch. The Aruch was more better known for his dictionary of Talmudic texts. The Aruch was a Rishon, and he wrote a dictionary of Talmudic texts. But within the dictionary, he laced it with halachic references as well. And in the Aruch mentions this problem of psik reisha nichalei. And what we have is a case that's brought down in the Gemara in Ksubas. The case is Haima Suchraisa and Ziosa. I remember being in yeshiva learning this and struggling on the words for hours, just to translate it, obscene words I never came across before. What we have is it's a very, if you pass me this, I'll try and demonstrate on the coffee. In the old days, they had a barrel of wine, whatever. It'll be good. Have a barrel of wine, and they had a wooden barrel or whatever it was. And today we have these nice taps, like a spout that you open and close. So in the olden days, what they had, a very primitive invention, was they would drill a hole in the barrel and then plug it with a piece of wood. They'd plug it. Then they would fill the barrel with liquid, and then they would remove the spout, allow the liquid to pour out, and pop the spout back in. Yeah, that's what they would do. So it's not like a tap where you open and close it. It's literally a spout. Now, what's the problem with that? Nothing yet. The problem is that they understood the same thing that we still understand, that with sealants. They understood the problem of sealants. That your wooden peg doesn't fit totally the dimensions exactly of the hole in the barrel, which will result in a leak. So you need something to plug up like we use rubber sealants today. We use a rubber like this rubber kind of sealant that is expandable and contracts, and it squeezes to fit the shape of the hole that it's been put into. So they had a very similar invention. What they did was they took a piece of cloth of material and they wetted the cloth. Yeah, so they wet the cloth, squeeze, and then they pushed it in, and then as it would expand and it would fill the hole, fill the size of the hole, and it wouldn't leak. Now, when you wet the cloth and you plug this wet cloth, shove it deep into the hole, you're squeezing liquid out of the cloth.
Yes, and that is not allowed.
That's not allowed. Squeezing liquid out of a cloth is schita, which is what either, in different examples, it's either falls under the category of dosh, which is threshing, which is removing one thing from another, or it falls under the category of melavin, which is laundering, because laundering, not money laundering, clothes laundering, washing clothes, because the act of washing requires filling something with water, getting water or some kind of detergent, some agent in the cloth, and then wringing it out again to help bring the dirt out with it. So which we used to, remember, after swimming, everyone used to swimming, everyone used to do that, and then put their swimming trunks in the bag. So you're squeezing liquid out of the thing. So they spoke about this. So that's the Gemara speaks about and says forbidden to do because you're going to squeeze. Now, on this, the Balei HaTosa said, according to some of the Balei HaTosa I mentioned before, this was a psik reisha that either could be nichalei or lo nichalei. In other words, it's psik reisha. It's an inevitable act. You're not actually engaged in an act of squeezing, What are you doing? A permitted act. The permitted act is plugging up a hole with a piece of wood. But inevitably, squeezing will occur. Now, do you want the squeezing or do you not want the squeezing? So they said that in the event, and this is interesting because you do, in some cases you do want the squeezing, in other cases you don't. But they made differentiation between wet. Basically, the garment wasn't on its own wet. The garment had become wet from the wine that it had touched and come in contact with in the barrel. So when you push the dry garment in, it becomes wet and then it gets squeezed. Now, in the event that the squeezed wine, the excess wine that's been squeezed out the cloth, will run back into the barrel, then you want then it signifies that you want it. In the event that it will run out the barrel and you're happy with that, so long as you squeeze, so long as then you don't want it. And they had a big discussion about it. And what they said was they disagreed. The Ria and the Orach disagreed. One opinion said, an inevitable act that's not wanted, that's unwanted, is forbidden midrabanon. And the other one said, is like dobashem v'schav, and it goes back to what we spoke about before, where it's not inevitable, even though it is inevitable, it goes back to that category, it's totally permitted. So have a discussion whether it's forbidden or permitted. Shulchan Aruch brings this discussion, and Shulchan Aruch unusually brings both, well, not unusually brings both opinions, but what he basically does is, he says that many people were lenient like opinion A, but however, opinion A isn't correct, it's not correct, he says, and he says there's lots of problems with opinion A, and therefore it shouldn't be done. So the Shulchan Aruch gives light to opinion A, and say it's permitted, and his maskana, his conclusion, is that it's not permitted, but it's only drabanon. It's forbidden midrabanon. So now what we've established is, and this is where we get to light sense, and this is where we touch light sense, where we get to it, is an inevitable action that's not wanted is better than an inevitable action that is wanted. An inevitable action that is wanted would be Torah law. An inevitable action that's not wanted would either be permitted according to one opinion or would be drabanon. But even if we say it's a drabanon, it doesn't stop us from using the permitted opinion as a combination under extenuating circumstances. Is that, like I said earlier to your chair, that we can't forget that we can never forget that whenever we have something that has become banned unilaterally in halacha, then we don't anymore start to throw in opinions that were never included in the corpus, in the scope of Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch is more, it's binding. Gemara is binding. Gemara brings exceptional cases of lots of things. Gemara brings exceptional rulings. It's not accepted. Wasn't accepted unilaterally by the consensus or Rabbanon. It's not accepted. But the Shulchan Aruch very often brings two opinions. And the reason why it brings two opinions is not to say he often brings two and he clearly rules like one. As he said, opinion A is as follows, opinion B is as follows, and the halacha is like opinion B. So in which case, why did he bring opinion A in the first place? He didn't mention every opinion. The Shulchan Aruch very often doesn't mention at all every opinion. Often there's a machlokas of 5 different opinions, and he just brings one as the halacha. So why does he bring both opinions? The idea is because he's telling you that even though the halacha follows opinion B, but opinion A can be used, but zero, which means in a combination of other factors, you can be aware that opinion A exists. Because he gives enough credibility to opinion A to use it when it's necessary. So now we have
that's the way you should teach.
That's
Actually, you should teach in general. In general, when you are a professor or whatever, you should use this kind of method which is used. So you bring several cases and you come to them, but could be, okay, but listen, this is what we do now because and then you erase the other ones and you say this.
That's
so
good.
It's a didactical way.
So it absolutely. So psigration to loy nichling, a psigration that's not wanted, is now forbidden, drabanon, and a possible opinion that says it's permitted. And that now, we're not going to. I don't want to take out any conclusions halacha l'maisa, actual practical halacha, for the simple reason that very often in halachic questions there's more than one potential issue. There could be other malachas involved. There could be other activities involved. There could be other problems. But what we will say, because to touch on the idea, is that there could be a tremendous difference between an electric light sensor, which is inevitable, that you want the light to come on, or you are happy that the light comes on, and one that you don't want. Now, an example of that would be, and this is something that's a very common misconception. Let's say I put outside my own house a light that should go on and off so that burglars don't whatever, the burglars don't come. Now, I want that light to go on whenever someone comes in the garden. It's not good enough. Everyone agrees, all the authorities agree. I couldn't turn around and say, it's true I want it, but on Shabbos, because it's forbidden, I don't want it. That's ridiculous. Because no, we're not talking, the Shulchan Aruch and the Halach is not talking about very wicked people, God forbid, or people, bad people, or people who don't know, who want to break Shabbos, who say, we're not talking about that the only time it's forbidden is when you want to break Shabbos, and as soon as you don't want to break Shabbos, it's not wanted anymore. It's an unwanted act. Of course, that's what we're talking about, where the actual result, this inevitable result, is generally desired or not desired. Yeah, generally desired by you. So if I put a light outside my house and I desire that the light will come on every time someone comes in the garden, including myself, because I want this as a burglary prevention, that if a bad person comes in the middle of the night, the light will go on and it will scare him, or because it's dark and I want to conserve electricity, I want to save energy, so I don't want the light to be on the whole day and the whole evening. So what I do is I put it on this electric light sensor and it only goes on for a minute or two when I come on, and I want it. Now that it's Shabbos and I don't want it, doesn't help. So switch it off before Shabbos. If I don't want it, it doesn't make it unwanted. It is a wanted act. It's a wanted result, let's call it. So I do act A, which is walking. It's inevitably going to result in malacha, which is the light coming on. But do I want it? Do I not want it? Well, if I put it there, I fixed it in, then I want it. It's as simple as that. Like the authorities are universal on that idea. What would be called unwanted is, let's say someone else puts it there to the extent that you, because of Shabbos, would prefer not to have it the whole week. You know, a friend of mine lives in one of the white buildings on the Van Nijrodeweg. There's a few white buildings, and recently they refitted in the stairwell, so they haven't. That stairwell has no lights. There's no lights all the way up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what to do?
And this is a tremendous problem, but we'll possible solutions we can work out.
No light switch off.
So here,
by itself.
so that
If you come in,
it switches on. You come into the stairwell, the staircase, it switches on. It switches on, yeah.
Something, but you have two different. You have also this small light, and when you come in, it's
yes. So okay, absolutely. So let's talk about case. It's pitch black in the stairwell, dark. There's no lights from the windows, no nothing. And the lights go on. Now, when the lights go on, it's in essence nichele. It's wanted. It's wanted. But here there's a discussion about whether I want it or I would prefer the whole week to go in the dark because of Shabbos. And it's not clear. It's not entirely transparent what we would categorize it as. But it's certainly true there's an element of wanting it because I need to walk in the stairwell. But if I were to now go, for example, and put my own little light at intervals along the thing, enough, not a lot of light, but enough that I could easily go through the stairwell without their light, then I can turn around and say to myself that I don't want that light the whole week now, their light. I have a different option. I have an alternative solution, and I now do not want their thing. In other words, in your own house, you can't say that. In your own house, you can't put it up in the weekday and say, I don't want it to go on Shabbos, and turn it off. You can't say something because you want it to be there the whole week, so the burglars should not come or that to conserve electricity. But in the case of someone else put it there, and you don't need it totally, and you do an act to signify that you're unhappy with his whatever, so you've done something to make a thing that it now goes from the category of being nichele, wanted, to the category of lo nichele, of not wanted. Now, not wanted in itself, we said, is still a drabonon. Situation lo nichele is a drabonon. So then we have to get back into, like we said, into when can we use the other opinion? What kind of extenuating circumstances would we forbid a person to go to his house, to and from his house on Shabbos, because of something that someone else has done? Again, if it was totally forbidden, then yeah, in theory, if the only way, then who said you have to leave it? As extreme as it sounds, if leaving your house resulted in multiple malachas, and then stay in your house on Shabbos, serve Hashem from inside your house. You can keep Shabbos inside your house. It's extreme to suggest it because we don't have, Baruch Hashem, such a case. But here in the event that
no, it's not so far away. We were in South Africa, and then de hekken zijn allemaal met with electricity and you can't go
You
out.
can't go in,
Can't
you
go
can't go out.
It's impossible.
It's impossible. Yeah.
Shabbos.
But
So-
there's something else maybe.
Yes.
Protection.
Yeah. Protection. Yeah.
And in hotels with electric keys.
Electric keys.
In
Yeah.
Israel, you can ask for the Shabbos key, but you have cars with for electricity. If they come in, impossible. They know it.
Yeah.
Prague we had where.
Nobody's
Jewish
open the door.
also the tourists had special.
Special keys for.
So the good news is that once it gets to loy nichale, once it gets to unwanted, and like we said, first of all, we have the oroch, the oroch says it's permitted, which we said we can use it. And then we have other combinations of, is the action that you're doing forbidden by Torah law? Is the resultant action Torah law, drabonon, because then it would be a situation to loy nichale in the case of a drabonon. In other words, dragging a bench on the floor, until now, just be giving a simple example, dragging a bench on the floor it would be, in theory, could be a deraisa of making a groove, which is digging. But what happens if you do action A and it inevitably results in something that's forbidden, but only drabonon forbidden, not deraisa forbidden? Yeah, so a psik ratio of a drabonon, not a psik ratio of a melacha deraisa, not a psik ratio of digging, which is deraisa, but a psik ratio of something that's forbidden by rabbinical law. Yeah. So I'll go back to the example of the screens. If I walk in front of the camera and somewhere there's an imprint on a screen, again, I'm only giving examples for the thing, but don't take it because there's often more problems than the one that we're focusing on. But just to take the writing on the screen, I mentioned before that the image that I'm drawing on the screen is not miskayim. It doesn't last. It's gone within an instant. It's always a new image repeating itself. So in that instance, it's not comparable to writing Minat Torah. It would be like writing Drabbana. So what if I walk in the street in front of a camera that will cause an image to come up on someone's screen, but it's a Drabbana, not a deraisa. So now we've got psik reisha in a Drabbana, not in a deraisa. We've got action A, which is walking, permitted, but it inevitably results in something coming out that is forbidden, but only forbidden by rabbinical law, not by Torah law. So psik reisha in the Drabbana is better than psik reisha in deraisa. A psik reisha deloy nichale that's not wanted in a Drabbana is even better. So you can sort of try and measure up how severe it would be, how many different authorities would allow it, and then what are the circumstances to permit it. And that would be the role of a rabbi.
40 years ago, when it was for shoot, we had stores, we had the television, and we had the camera.
Yes, I remember that.
Then the device was not
Yeah, because it's like walking.
but now the whole day.
If you know it.
Watching. So what? So the things I asked Charles, I did 40 years ago. It's not. What is the difference? Were the rabbis wrong, or was it the time of it was not so severe? There was only one light street.
It's definitely not worse.
But
It's got more difficult.
So should you keep? You can't keep the showers from 50.
Yeah,
so
it's got more
like you
difficult.
should go shopping with
Yeah,
showers.
It's got more difficult, and like we mentioned before with the snow, there's sometimes that the Rabbanim said if it's no other way around it, and it's only inevitable but not wanted and not deraisa and whatever, and all those various
Yeah, but
combinations.
the other way around is also different. If you are 20 or 80,
Absolutely, absolutely. That's part of the Shiloh. The Mishnah Berurah, on every single page of Mishnah Berurah, and all the authorities always talk about Shas HaTchak, extenuating circumstances, Soyrach Gadol, a great nesset, Choila, unwell people, and unwell people also are people who have disabilities. These are things that are mentioned in literally in the black and white Shulchan Aruch. So it's always part of the combination. But like I said to you before, the role needs to have the competence to know all the range of the opinions to make this dynamic image in his brain to put together. Oh, we're talking about deraisa. We're talking about Drabbana. What are we allowed to? What scope do we have to move? No.
I do things. There's a rabbi, and he lives in non-Jewish neighbors, and he put on those things.
Yeah.
It's whatever he does, it's always, or the one goes on, or the other one goes on. So there's a solution. I know a rabbi also in Amsterdam. He goes to the backyard.
Yeah.
Enters his house to the backyard because then he doesn't have the lights. That's possible. If it is possible, I think you should advise that. If not, what shall the rabbi do? Oh, rabbi, what shall the person do? Because he said he go to his neighbors, put off the lights on Shabbos, and he can't do it, so he goes there. Even in
I had a problem, I tell you. I had a
What's the
problem.
solution of the rabbi?
I had a problem when I lived here op Soeterdaal, and my neighbors had a light if you pass the and I asked Rabbi Joost, don't go straight onto your door, but make a turn, light to the and then go in.
In the front
door, but don't go straight on, but straight on. The light is going on. If you walk like this to your door, he didn't. Maybe he didn't go door, but that Rabbi used to.
But was the light still on when you make the curve, or was it going out?
No. Go on. Go on. When you open, when I go in my garden.
But you don't
Sorry.
What's the reason of the straight line then?
When I go
The
home
straight
from
line,
the-
no. If I do the straight line, the light's going on. Yeah, and
It's not necessary.
here in the middle, maybe on the middle. I think so. So on the middle.
At least we got it down.
Dan pakt hij die mij weer in de middel. Zo was het.
Like a base of measures
Wat
here.
doe je als je bij de buren?
Ja, nou goed, ik heb het probleem niet meer.
This is different from a microphone. I don't go to where's a microphone. I use it.
Yeah. And the microphone is
Ik had toen ik woonde op Soeterdaal, mijn buren hadden zo'n licht dat aanging als je naar binnen ging.
First of all,
Dus lagen ze halverwege het pad, pakten dat licht en dan ging het aan. En Rav S.A. zei, loop dan niet rechtdoor, maar loop zo, dus door de tuin. Maar ik kon dus zo'n beetje door de tuin lopen en dan naar mijn deur.
So that's readily
Dat was, als het dan aangaat, dan ga je erin zitten.
Secondly, the hearing aid is you're not actually actively doing anything. It's very passive, totally passive. It's a mechanism put into place for Shabbos.
Nee, nou ja.
Just the sound waves all around you are amplified in the ear. A microphone, I'm talking into it. I'm generating electrical sound waves as I talk. Every time I talk, I'm willingly, deliberately, not passively, I'm actively generating electrical signals and sound waves while I talk.
Nou, ja, dat is jullie probleem.
One is willing and one is
Yeah.
I must run.
Okay, listen. Thank you very much. It was fair. Normally, I ask always the speaker for about a week of 6, making your appointment. And I think everybody likes that you come back.
Okay,
yes, was that a shame? Yes, you are not.
Carry on with this.
Yeah, okay. Yes, one moment.